Hi, I'm Jane Hutcheon, and in July 2010 I created 1+1, and up until September 2019 recorded nearly 500 interviews. In this series, I'm bringing together my top 10. They're the conversations which have taken me by surprise or somehow had an impact on me. I hope you enjoyed this interview with actress and activist Calpernia Addams. Calpernia Addams, welcome to 1+1.
Thank you for having me.
I actually thought you were going to be quite scary after seeing your YouTube video that talked about bad questions to ask a transsexual. And I know throughout your life you've had people asking you very inappropriate and personal questions, and questions you obviously don't want to field. So I don't want to be in that boat. What shouldn't I ask you?
Well, I'm much kinder and more approachable in real life. Honestly, if I can sense that someone's coming at it from a place of empathy, you know, I'm happy. I'm really kind of unoffendable. I have a great sense of humor. And that video, though, I thought I'd vent a little bit of frustration, and it was fun to do that.
Do you still need to answer those kinds of questions today?
It's surprising how often I do have to answer some of the most basic questions, and I always say I do understand the curiosity. It's still quite unusual in the larger scheme of things for someone to transition, but I would just hope that people will see me as a human being and keep in mind what is polite and considerate to ask. You know, if you can Google something or search it on the web, please do. If you just can't find it anywhere else, perhaps buy me a cocktail and I will let you ask.
I'm sorry we don't have a cocktail here now. I do have a glass of water for you.
That will do. Lovely, thank you.
Can I ask you, what were you like as a small child?
Well, I grew up in the South, in the United States, in a state called Tennessee, and the South is very friendly, very family-oriented, very musical, but it's also deeply religious and conservative. So I was a creative, fun child. I think I was very empathetic and always wanted to hold people's hands and you know, be helpful and all that. But when my gender issues started to manifest, I got very negative feedback for that. When I wanted to play as a little girl or act like a girl or any of those things, it was punished quite severely.
Who by?
My parents. My father was a minister in a Southern fundamentalist church. My mother was the church piano player. And they loved me very much, but they were of the time and of the place that they grew up, and they didn't know how to deal with issues like mine. So it was very difficult. I became quite introverted after I discovered that expressing myself resulted in punishment.
And how old were you when you started to express yourself?
I have a distinct memory. There's a television program that aired back then in the U.S. About a flying nun starring Sally Field. And it was a silly, whimsical show, and she was a nun who would fly around. And I ran through church. I was probably 5 or 6 years old with a white piece of paper on my head to copy her sort of habit. And I was screaming, "I'm Sister Betrill, I'm Sister Betrill." And I don't know if my parents were more horrified that I was saying I was a girl or that I was saying I was a Catholic. But, you know, my earliest memories, I would choose a girl's name for myself and play those games.
What about your body? How did you feel about your body?
I remember hating my body so much. I didn't have words for what was wrong. I just knew that when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see what I wanted to see. It eventually became, I say, it was like trying to look into the sun, to look into a mirror. I couldn't quite do it, and I'd have to do it from the side. And I would cry when I had to take my shirt off to get my hair cut and things like that. I didn't know why, I just knew that it felt wrong.
So would you say that your childhood was a supremely unhappy time? Were there ever happy times?
It was a very difficult time with a lot of shame and frustration and a lot of fear. I was raised in that church, and I liken it to a cult. We weren't allowed to see modern movies, listen to modern music. Women were not allowed to wear makeup or color their hair. Wearing gold was vanity, so my parents did not wear wedding rings. And it was just a strange way to grow up, I'll say. But there were happy moments. I played music, and my family was loving, and we had wonderful food. I'd run through the woods and the hills and play with the farm animals, and there were good times too.
Are you in touch with your family today?
Only just recently. My mother and I have reconnected in a good way. In 25 years, I had not spent more than an hour in their company. I would go once a year and have an awkward meal. But I flew her out to Hollywood this year, and I was like, Mom, you're getting older. I'm getting older. Let's just do this, And she just took a deep breath, and for the first time, she called me Callie, short for Calpernia, and she called me she, and we went out together, and she saw that the world responded to me as a woman, and I think that allayed some of her fears that, the world's going to be so cruel to my baby, and we're building a new relationship.
That's amazing. Must feel wonderful.
It does. I never thought we would have that moment. They're wonderful and loving people, but we had some hard times.
They didn't want you to go to college, I believe. Is that right?
I was such a bright student. I enjoyed school and did so well until I really started getting depressed in later years. But they had always told me that education leads one away from God. So I was told from an early age that they could not afford college. I shouldn't try to go anyway because it would lead me away from God. And so despite being very suited for it, I did not go. And until much later, I put myself through college. But it was one of my great regrets.
So the decision was, rather than go to college, to get into the Navy. What was that about? Was that about escaping home?
Around age 18, when I was finishing high school, I just saw no future for myself. I thought, well, in addition to being a minister, my father was a plumber and pipe fitter and welder. And I thought, is that even a possibility for me? No. And I didn't know what else to do. So I had scored very well on the military entrance exams. They appeared and said, you can have any job you want in the military. Your scores are so good. And I thought, it's going to be hard, but I'll escape at least. I'll get out. And I joined the Navy, and sure enough, I did. I saw the world, learned self-confidence, and it did a lot of good for me.
So was that your decision to become a field hospital medic and to go? You were in Desert Storm, weren't you?
Yes. I joined the Navy Hospital Corps because I thought at least I can be, a little more soft and caring and provide comfort to people. I don't have to, kill or fix giant weapons or anything. And the first Gulf War was just beginning around that time, so I had additional training as a field medical combat specialist with the U.S. Marines. And straight away, I flew to Saudi Arabia with the Marines and served all over, taking care of sailors and Marines and prisoners of war.
What was happening with your gender dysphoria at this time? Were you still pretty much in the closet about what was going on in your head?
In these days, the internet was not quite what it is now, and resources were so hard to come by. It was just outdated medical texts or lurid sort of pulp novels when it came to trans issues. So I was figuring out what I was. I was in what was perceived as a male body. I was attracted to men, and I was very feminine. So I thought, am I gay? Am I, what am I? And I was still trying to figure that out, very in the closet. Luckily, my last year, 2 years in the military, I served on an Alaskan island in the Aleutian chain, like 1,200 miles out in the Bering Sea, tiny and isolated. And a pack of wilderness lesbians took me under their wing, and these airplane mechanic women, and they sensed, that I had something going on, and we were all undercover, but in sort of the Alaskan wilderness, we would go have campouts and fires and just talk and have this underground society. Straight away when I got out of the military, that's when I started exploring my trans identity.
Was there something that awoke the feeling in you that made you realize that you had to do more than just like men, that you had to do something about your own body and how you felt?
When I got out of the military, I found a show bar, and I saw some beautiful, glamorous performers on stage, and it turned out that they were transsexual women. And I was just gobsmacked. I thought, wow, it's possible. If they can do it, then why can't I? And so almost immediately I started apprenticing myself to them, trying to learn their secrets, hovering around their mirrors. And other women do it different ways, but I'm a theater person, I'm a showbiz person, so it was sort of a perfect combination for me.
And at what stage did you meet the soldier Barry Winchell?
I had transitioned socially and legally and taken a lot of medical steps. So I was living full-time as a woman in the late 90s in Nashville, and my entertainment career had taken off. So I was performing 5 nights a week, 2 shows a night at a 40,000 square foot nightclub for 2,000 people on a Saturday night. And one Sunday, we had some military folks come in from the nearby base, and it was a lighter crowd, so I was playing around, having fun on the microphone, just talking. And there was a shy, handsome young man out there, and I flirted with him a little, and we had a spark. After the show, we talked and made a coffee date, and that was the beginning of our relationship.
When he first showed interest in you, what went through your head? Because I think, as you've said before, it's quite difficult, particularly for a newly trans woman, to find real love, isn't it?
It is so difficult to find love as a trans woman because we're so often fetishized. A lot of the earliest media portrayals of trans women are either in pornography or they're always portrayed as prostitutes, psychos, and punchlines in the movies. So, people meet us and have those preconceptions in their head. Barry Winchell was a heterosexual man. He had only ever dated women. So, of course, I had worries, am I woman enough for him? Am I good enough? And he set me at ease quickly. We went out to coffee. I'd scrubbed off all my show makeup. I just had hair in a ponytail and a clean face and jeans and a t-shirt. And he accepted me and flirted with me and treated me like a lady. And it was very exciting because one is so insecure in those early days.
You dated him, I believe, for about a year, and you were actually on stage and taking part in a competition. I always feel really sad when I think about this because you were winning this competition as a performer in Tennessee, and that night, as you were really getting these accolades, I suppose, from society, he was being beaten until he died. I know you've spoken about this a lot, but what was it like to learn that news about his death?
Well, I have to preface it, by saying it has been 15 years since his death. So, but that night I was competing in the Tennessee Entertainer of the Year pageant, and he had duty that night. It was the 4th of July, which is American Independence Day. It's perhaps our most patriotic holiday. And apparently, while I was on stage performing, his roommate, who had been stirring up anti-gay sentiment against him for dating me and been mocking him and creating a terrible environment, his roommate influenced another soldier to go outside and take a baseball bat and beat him to death in his sleep. And it's just hard to imagine or think about that somebody could do that to anyone else, and even especially when they're asleep. When is a person more innocent than when they're asleep? And
I'm sorry.
it was, and love is so hard to find. It's so hard to find someone who can accept you when you feel so flawed and so less than. And to find somebody who has an open heart enough like that, and then to so cruelly kill them. It still breaks my heart all these years later. And one of the men is out of prison now, if you can believe it, and the other is still there. But
Do you get any comfort knowing that what has happened since then and the fact that the don't ask, don't tell policy no longer exists? Do you get comfort from the fact that things have moved on? Do you feel things have moved on?
As a former military person myself who suffered greatly under the military's discriminatory policies, and then years later to have seen those policies provide a breeding ground for that hatred, to provide a shield and a cover for those terrible sentiments to flourish, I am so, glad now. It's an understatement to say how happy I am that Don't Ask, Don't Tell has been banished from the U.S. military. We have changed the laws now, but we still have to change the hearts of everyone involved, because, as we know, we can outlaw discrimination, but it can still happen underground. So we have more battles to fight.
Calpernia, how do we change the hearts of people?
I think we need two fronts. We need the brilliant minds to work in the halls of power, the houses of law, the houses of government, to create the backbone, the laws that we need to give strength to these movements. But we also need the artists and the personalities and the human faces to reach out through, media, film and television, music, and even just that friendly face at the coffee shop or somewhere, and that's my talent, I hope, is to be an artist and a friendly face, to show people, we're not scary, we're not perverts, we're not a danger to them or their marriage or their gender identity or their sexuality. We just want to participate in society.
Was Barry's murder, was that the fundamental, I suppose, event that changed your life direction, that made you want to be a communicator?
After his murder, I realized that I had to step up and first fight for justice, which we did through getting the convictions against his murderers, and then demand, the abolition of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I'm out there now. I have a bit of the ear of society, so I do hope to use that to make some change. They've forced this showgirl to evolve a little bit and become a little bit more of an activist, and I think I'm better for it. I appreciate the opportunity.
This is a ridiculous question, but because I'm not in your shoes, what does normal mean? Is it feeling comfortable in your own skin? Is it being able to look at your body, look yourself in the eye and say, I love that? What is it?
For me, I think normal would be having all those fears and anxieties of being less than or being rejected by just everyday society, having those things fade away so that I can sort of have an equal starting point to everyone else. You know, not everyone, everyone worries about their bodies a little bit. You know, am I too heavy? Am I too thin? Am I pretty enough? Those things are always going to be there, but I love being at a point in my life where I can wash off all this makeup and just go out dressed simply, and everyone treats me like they treat everyone else. And that's a gift, and it was a goal for me. It's not every trans person's goal, but I'm lucky to have it.
In the media at the moment, there are a lot of stories about Bruce Jenner. There's been a bit of an obsession about his changing appearance. Is this an issue with media's lack of acceptance? Is it an issue with Bruce Jenner not speaking out about what he's undergoing at the moment? How should we view this event?
The Hollywood tabloid media it borders on sociopathic, I would almost say, because they don't care if they're hurting someone. They don't care if they're hurting a political movement. They just want, you know, those clicks or that attention, those views. Bruce Jenner, you know, he was already a media figure for many decades. He's part of the Kardashian family, which I don't know how much they've penetrated over here, but they're completely ubiquitous, much to some people's horror in the United States. And he's unfortunately at the eye of this tabloid storm already. And I say he because at this moment so far, Bruce has not come out as trans officially, so I don't want to make any assumptions. But, you know, I have seen a lot of things happening that certainly I've seen in other people's transitions. So I would not be surprised to hear him come out as a trans woman. I think the tabloid media is just cruel. They don't care if they hurt Bruce, and they're going to keep at it until something else horrible happens.
A little while ago, we were talking about young kids today who grow up and know when they're quite young that they're not in their right bodies. And today there seems to be a greater level of acceptance, particularly from parents, and the parents in many cases want to support that. Do you feel, in a sense, that you were born at the wrong time?
I've always felt I was born at the wrong time on two different fronts. In sort of a fantasy sense, I'd love to have been born in the 1940s, although I know the reality was more difficult back then. But I feel that I was born at the wrong time because nowadays we're riding this new wave of acceptance from parents, from medical professionals who are often the gatekeepers to therapy and medical intervention. And everyone's just so much more educated thanks to the internet and new research and media things that are happening. It's going to be so much less of a dramatic, you know, terrible thing, I think, in the coming years for someone to transition, even at an early age.
And in terms of Hollywood's treatment of people with gender differences, you've obviously advised a lot of people in their movie roles. Do you see the way Hollywood treats people with gender dysphoria or lesbians or gays in a different way now?
I think a lot of minorities in Hollywood go through phases where in the earliest phases, they are demonized, and then they sort of become clown characters, and then they become tragedies, like, oh, that poor thing, and then they become the amusing sidekick, and then finally they become a fully realized human character. And we've seen that with trans people. I've advised actors who were not trans in the last few years on playing these roles, but the only reason I did that was to sort of ameliorate the damage that could have been done, I think, if the portrayals were not done well. And we've seen doors open because of these things. We're going to see a lot more authentic trans portrayals done by trans actors, and I'm really excited about that. I'd love a few of those roles myself.
Do you think you were born resilient, or did you become resilient?
I don't know how I've kept going sometimes. I think people might see me as being happy or carefree, and I am that, but there has been a great deal of unkindness sent my way over the years, to put it lightly, just from strangers who were unkind about someone who doesn't conform to gender stereotypes, to someone who doesn't conform to the sexuality stereotypes, rejection from family, cruelty from strangers, laws saying that I don't even deserve to have a job or a place to live. It's been a difficult road. Sometimes I wonder how I have kept going, but it just seems like I have to. I want to see what's next. I'm surrounded by wonderful friends. I have a lot of love in my life, and I'm excited by the future. So I just keep a-going,
Calpernia Addams, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you for speaking with 1+1.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's one of my top 10. Thanks for watching. You can watch again on iView. See you next time.